Welcome to the National Black Leadership and Empowerment Project series, Ask an Elder.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in with us today. I have some fabulous co-hosts and panel members with me as we do a talk with the elders. Ask the elder rather. My name is Malik Glee. I graduated from Howard University in 2016. And of May of this year, I graduated with my Master's of Cultural Sustainability from Goucher College. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I am currently the founder and principal consultant of my own consultancy firm, the Glee Group Cultural Planning, which does exhibition production and curatorial research services for small museums. I am here with my fellow Bison to talk about the 2020 election and what we perceive to be some of our goals for the next 4 years as we enter into new leadership. So I would like to just start with, and we can go popcorn style, whoever would like to speak. Just want to hear from everyone what made you choose Howard, and when did you graduate, and what was your major? So I will begin. I graduated in 2016. I come from a family of Morgan State, Norfolk State, and Howard, so an HBCU family. But I wanted to study theater arts, and Howard had the best theater program for HBCU, so it made the decision very easy. And I graduated, as I said, in 2016. And I think I answered all the questions. So I'll pass it to whichever elder would like to take the question next. Why did you choose Howard? What was your major? And what year did you graduate?
I'll jump in. Name is Roger Glass. I'm originally from New York. Graduated from Howard University in the School of Communications in 1975. I came to Howard thinking I was going to be a lawyer and pursuing a career in political science. But in my sophomore year, the School of Communications opened up at Howard University. And in growing up in the New York area, there used to be a guy on the radio called Eddie OJ at Sunrise. So I thought I was going to be a disc jockey. So I decided to major in broadcasting at Howard University. But that's in summary how I ended up at Howard and what I did at Howard.
I'll go next. I'm Janine Versan, and I was in the School of Business. I majored in accounting, received my Bachelor of Business Administration in 1981. My entire family attended HBCUs. Both of my parents attended Xavier University in New Orleans, and my two oldest siblings also attended Xavier. And then the sister right next to me attended Howard. And I had applied to only 3 colleges, all HBCUs, North Carolina Central University, Xavier, and to Howard. And I decided to attend Howard, where one of my sisters was, and they offered me a full scholarship. And they had the best business program, accounting program. And that's what I wanted to be. I was very interested in becoming a CPA and being in the business world. And it was a fabulous experience. We have 4 adult children. All 4 went to HBCUs. 3 of the 4 went to Howard and 1 went to Spelman. And so that's my Howard experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm originally from Durham, North Carolina, and there was a young lady that lived on my block that went to Howard. You all probably know her, famous cheerleader, Brenda Jenkins. And I always wanted to go to an HBCU, and Howard had a good School of Communications. I could major in journalism, and I had considered other schools, Morgan, Johnson C. Smith, and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. They also had an excellent communications program. But the summer of 73, Brenda brought home a double Bison yearbook from 1973. And I went through it. I laid on her floor and went through it page by page. And I said, that's where I'm going, to Howard University. So a yearbook sold me on Howard University.
Okay, I'll jump in. I'm Carol Parkinson Hall, a resident and born and bred in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I did not choose Howard first. I went to an art magnet high school in Philadelphia. And of course, all of the counselors and all of the teachers were pushing all of the fine arts schools, your traditional schools. And my mother graduated from Westchester University, which is a white institution in Pennsylvania. And my father graduated from Lincoln University in Oxford, Pennsylvania. Their experiences were completely different. My father just was nurtured and loved on at Lincoln. And my mother was the first to integrate the dormitories at Westchester. And her experience was horrific. And she just said that she didn't want any of her children to ever have an experience like she had. And so we had no choice but to go to an HBCU. She said, my money is Black, your father's money is Black, and unless they give you a full ride and then you put you up when you come home for the holidays, you're going to an HBCU. So I chose North Carolina A&T because I wanted to be an architect, at least I thought I did. And the math almost killed me. So I decided to major in art education, but I knew that I did not want to stay at North Carolina A&T, and Howard was just calling me. So I transferred to Howard University, majored in fine arts, graduated with a BFA in 1977, and the best time of my life was spent on the campus of Howard University, and I'm just grateful.
My name is Dr. Nathan Daughtry. Can you all see me?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
we can
okay.
see it.
Yes, class of 1974, Howard University School of Liberal Arts. I graduated with Bachelor of Science, ultimately went on to medical school in New Jersey. I've been a practicing orthopedic surgeon for many, many years. I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Harlem. And during the 70s, an extremely tumultuous time. And I think out of a sense of self-identity, I wanted to go to a historically Black university. I got accepted into Ivy League schools. I got scholarship offers and all sorts of things like that. And one of the other important things about Howard offered me a full academic scholarship. And coming from a single parent family, that was very, very important. Also, I had an uncle that graduated from Howard. And even though the people in my high school wanted me to go to Ivy League school, I was like, you know what? If that school was good enough for my uncle, it's going to be good enough for me. Best decision that I ever made.
Nate mentioned something about Howard that, brought back a memory for me, something about the 60s, I would say. I remember prior to deciding to go to Howard, I was watching the national news and there was a protest Howard University's campus, late 60s. 68, I think it was, or 69. And they were chanting, beep, beep, bang, bang, Hungala, Black Power. That resonated. that resonated. Yep. I felt like I wanted to be part of that experience, and that really was a big motivating factor for me.
Thank you all for sharing. And some of the reasons resonate with me as well. I committed myself there in 2012, but also wanting to learn more about my history and that spirit and history and legacy of revolutionary thinkers is what also brought me to Howard University. So I just want to elevate that. And I think that greatly sets the tone for our conversation today as we talk about the historic nature of the 2020 election, all featuring a panel of fellow Bison, and we know that our Vice President-elect, Ms. Harris, is a Howard alum as well. So my first question to the panel, and again, you all can pop in as you choose, is what was your level of involvement for the campaign process? Did you contribute to any fundraising efforts or registration efforts or volunteer? And do you think, because our Vice President-elect was a Howard alum, did that waiver in your participation, did that influence your participation as well?
I'll respond. I did phone banking, texting. I did fundraising. I participated in a fundraiser that Howard alumni put together. I did additional donations. I do honestly want to say that my enthusiasm was greater because there was a Howard alum on the ticket. I've always been involved for as long as I can remember in presidential campaigns, in local campaigns, in state campaigns. My parents were community activists before that term was even popular. I can remember as an 8 and 9-year-old being involved in the very first race for a Black woman in my hometown to be the first Black person to be on city council. I grew up in Florida, in St. Petersburg, Florida. But this race felt so personal. It was a Howard graduate. She was at HBCU. She was one of the Divine Nine. And I was going to do as much as I could to be a part of making that happen. As they say in sports, I was going to leave it all out on the field, all out on the court to do whatever I could to try and make it happen. So I did do more. I did a lot for Obama, but I definitely did more this time around. My husband probably already knows this, but I even did more donations than I did before. But I did it more, not just for her. And I know most of this conversation is about her, but I did it for more HBCU candidates because they were HBCU candidates. So it filtered through. It was a ripple effect. We had a Howard graduate who, in my state, was running for lieutenant governor, Yvonne Lewis Holly, and I contributed to her campaign for lieutenant governor. She had been a state representative before. I had never contributed to her state representative election, but I contributed multiple times to her election effort. So it just really, really energized me. And I don't mean to monopolize the time, but it made a difference because she was an HBCU graduate.
Yes, definitely. I supported many HBCU graduates this year. And this year, with it being a pandemic, it just made us have time to be still and know what was real. And we had an opportunity to support so many candidates virtually. I was proud to support Senator Harris, and I'm still, pinching myself. It's just, it's a very positive thing to have her as the vice president-elect, but it's still kind of hard, it's unbelievable. But, it's been a long time coming. And as a woman, it just was a crowning moment for this year, this being a centennial of women having the right to vote. Mm-hmm. And I know some people say that's debatable, but, in some places, we didn't vote until 1965. But in my hometown of Durham, North Carolina, in 1920, there were 50 Black women who voted, okay? But Kamala Harris is just outstanding. She's the perfect candidate, perfect vice president-elect, and she's a bison. And, she talks about how going to Howard prepared her, and I was happy to support her. And one thing that I did do in particular, what I always do is through my church, I register people to vote in West Baltimore in my community. And I even did it, even though I was leery because of the pandemic, I did go out for the whole month of October in person. And I did a lot of voter education as well. And as Janine said, I worked hard for Yvonne Lewis Holly, who was a Bison graduate, class of 1974. My home state is North Carolina. So I wanted her to be successful. She did not win, but she was a qualified, excellent candidate. And one thing that I will continue to do going forward, we have to, Black people, Black women have to contribute more financially to our candidates. We don't do that enough.
And that's not just for Black women, obviously. I think all of us, need to contribute to our candidates. Like the others, I contributed, online, which I've been doing, really going back many years. One of the candidates, as others here know, was a state Senate candidate in Mississippi, Michael Espy, who was a Howard University graduate and actually attended Howard while I was there. I think he was class of 75 as well. And but what I missed doing this time that I've done in past campaign is the door-to-door canvassing. I've been in the labor movement for pretty much all my adult life for the last 40 years or so. And in every presidential year, you know, starting with John Kerry and with the 2 Obama campaigns and in the 1 Clinton campaign, I was able to go. One time I was in Detroit for about 2 weeks campaigning. For Obama, I was down in the Norfolk area of Virginia campaigning. And that's a very energizing part of being politically involved, is to get out there and campaign face to face and meeting people. And I worked with a lot of school teachers and educators. So, you know, I had a chance actually to go into some schools and actually talk to some of the young people in those scenarios as well. But this time I did give. I mean, one thing I'm sure everybody has been exposed to is once you've given a few dollars to any of the candidates, you get a ton of emails requesting, you know, more monies. And so I was happy to give, certainly to the Bison who were running, to Jamie Harrison, you know, in South Carolina, to Warnock in Georgia, which we need to give again since he's in the runoff. And it's easy to do. So I think it's something we all, you know, should continue to do, you know, where and when we can.
Yeah. I had the privilege of meeting Kamala a couple of years ago at a reception that was given for state senator, was not state, but U.S. Senator Bob Casey Jr. And she was there to support him. And one of the sorority sisters that I was with said, you know, she's presidential material. She really, really is. And we talked and we laughed, and she was very approachable. And so when she decided to put her hat in the campaign, I called my sorority sister back and I said, you know what? I wish that you could give me a number to play, because you were right on it. You saw that in her. And this is before I think that, you know, there was any buzz around her name. But because as the president of my chapter, we are nonpartisan, I couldn't do anything publicly to campaign or support her, but I kept that in my heart. And of course, my heart was connected to my purse. And so I made sure that I donated money. And whenever I had the opportunity, you know, to speak as an individual, I talked about the wonderful things that I knew that she could accomplish. But in terms of volunteering, with the pandemic, we had to pivot. And we've always been out in the street campaigning, and not campaigning, excuse me, but registering people to vote and doing a lot around voter education and really helping to stop voter intimidation. But because of the pandemic, we had to do things virtually. And so one of the things that I'm proud of is that we were able to go into 3 high schools on the National Voter Education Day in September and do a Zoom assembly program and register young people to vote. We had a rapper and we had an attorney that talked about the importance of being engaged. And it was just a wonderful opportunity. We reached more students online than we were able to reach if we had gone into an actual school. And so we've been able to use the internet and to use technology in ways that we had never thought about using prior to get people to vote, calling on the phone and you know, just doing voter education, because our folks, there were so many missed messages going on in Pennsylvania, because for the first time we could vote by mail. And a lot of people had a lot of mixed messages about that. And so just being able to ensure people that it was a safe way to vote. And as you saw, Philadelphia delivered.
Yes.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
If I could add my little 2 cents in, about 2 years ago at our homecoming, I had a T-shirt that said Kamala 2020. And I remember pulling out that T-shirt at Roger's house, because I stayed at Roger's house, and Roger looked at me and said, Nate, maybe that's a little bit premature, but along with Charlemagne the God, who's the DJ on probably the most popular morning talk show, who also said that Kamala should run for president. The biggest thing that I did was step out on a leap of faith. And I knew she had the intelligence, the wisdom, the experience to do what she's doing. And my biggest vote for her was a vote of confidence. And yes, subsequently, I, like Roger, I got out my daggone checkbook and started writing some checks. And Roger, I've donated to almost everybody else that you said, so we can get like a competition. But one of the biggest things about it is, you know, can we as Black men follow great Black women in the light of Harriet Tubman, Shirley Chisholm, Fannie Lou Hamer, etc. So if you understand your history, you understand that there are great Black women who have led, and we need to just be prepared to follow them. I always look back to history to try to figure out what I should do today.
Nathan, on that note, Octavius Cato was, he lived in the 1800s, and he was one of the first activists to really try to get Blacks to vote, and was killed on election day in 1871. And so Black men have been out there all along. You know, we just erected a statue in front of City Hall.
I read about that.
Yeah, for Octavius Cato. So yeah, you know, black men of as women, we can't leave you. You have to be beside us in order for this to work.
Amen.
Definitely.
Thank you both. Thank everyone for the responses. My next question is, what do you think the impact of Senator Harris being the vice president-elect, and fingers crossed, prayerfully, they enter easily into office this coming January, what will be the long-term effects on HBCUs, not only for Senator Harris's visibility, but the visibility of Stacey Abrams, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and of course, Senator Harris, all three women being HBCU alums and having a very visible, productive, successful year this year?
Triple effect from them. That was, you know, a triple effect. It speaks volumes, Malik, in so many ways. It shows that HBCU institutions are stellar and prepare its graduates well to assume any position that they aspire to, given a level playing field. You know, that's often our challenge. We don't have the same access or opportunities, but we have the intellect and the skills and the, you know, just the wherewithal to get the job done. And it's definitely a great role model for young girls with the election of Senator Harris as VP elect. I don't know if you all saw these news reports, but so many little girls for their Halloween or trick-or-treat costume, they had on their pantsuit, and then they had on their Ruth Bader Ginsburg and robe and everything, you know, because they see, you know, that it's like a cliche. If you see it, you believe it, you can achieve it. So it's great for that.
I think we've already seen the results, especially in terms of young men going into sports. You know, a couple of the big football players that would have gone to, you know, the big white institutions have chosen to go to your Howards or your Morgans. And so I think that's a good thing. Also, you always hear folks that have not attended HBCUs talk about the lack of diversity, and it's a second-class education, and it was needed back then, but now we need to be, you know, we need to be able to deal in the white man's world. And so I don't understand why they're still relevant, but they are so misguided, because there's so much diversity in an HBCU, I met Black folks from all over the globe, you know, and you meet Black folks of all ethnicities, as well as, you know, rich Black folks. I had never really seen a whole lot of rich Black folks until I got to Howard. You know, you had folks that, you know, their great grandparents, you know, were college educated, which means that they were wealthy then and had still chosen to come to an HBCU. And so there's diversity, there's nurturing, and I sent both of my children to HBCUs because I knew that they needed to be nurtured. And in fact, I sent them to the South, the deep South, because I believe that there's a way that you're educated and nurtured in the South that we miss in the North. And I wanted them to have that. And so I put my money 1,000 times over again in an HBCU, and have done so by taking young people on college tours to HBCUs for the last 22 years.
Carol said something of how she mentioned how there are some folks who don't value, you know, the HBCU education because of the perceived lack of diversity. But I also have a lot of friends who are jealous, who did not go to HBCUs, they went to predominantly white institutions. And they actually are jealous of the kind of community and solidarity and indeed love, you know, that we have for each other. And they're not afraid, you know, to say to me that they missed having gone to, you know, a predominantly white institution. And the other thing I would say, you know, to your question about, you know, Stacey Abrams and Keisha Lance Bottoms, her father, of course, was Major Lance. I'm old enough to remember Major Lance. Her father was an R&B singer. And of course, you know, Kamala, they demonstrate the passion for service and justice that I think, you know, you gain from I know I gained from going to Howard University, you know, a passion to serve others, the passion to serve your community, because those jobs are often thankless jobs. You know, being in those elected positions, you don't get rich off of those positions. And that, you know, and if you look at the challenges, particularly that, you know, Keisha Lance Bottoms has had dealing with the pandemic, you know, there in Georgia, you know, she gets a lot of FaceTime, but there's a lot of, I'm sure, you know, challenges that most people wouldn't want to have. So again, that's the passion for serving others that I think is the real deal at HBCUs.
And I would just add that I think we can say with their examples of Kamala and Keisha and Stacey and Raphael Warnock, we're not settling for anything by going to an HBCU. We're not less than anybody else who goes to a predominantly white institution because of us attending an HBCU. We are capable. We come out prepared. We get a solid foundation from an academic standpoint. We know how to interact with people. We have the diversity of knowledge, skills, and experience and practicality. We've earned a seat at the table. And I believe all of them have shown that. We have earned a seat at the table.
We also have learned, Janine, that if there is not a seat at the table, that we bring our own seat and just move on in and do what we have to do.
Absolutely.
We're resilient. We're resilient.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, nobody needs to hand anything to us. You know,
that's right.
When we attend an HBCU, you know, we laugh about the tough times of having to deal with the A building and financial aid and all that kind of stuff. But the totality of the experience that we have, the totality of the rigor of the academics, of the professors who care about you, but also won't let you get away with anything because you are going to get your assignments in, but they're going to care enough to get to know the person. But sometimes the challenges that you deal with the A building, those are things that you lean on in life when you are dealing with somebody in a work environment too.
Perseverance.
You know, no, nothing that you experience at an HBCU won't benefit you.
Mhm.
And I just
Nothing.
want to add on the way we describe in my generation, and I want to know if it's the same for you all. The language we use is finesse. Like Howard taught us a particular way to operate socially, I would say primarily in the world. There's a particular finesse. You understand there's a lot of social politics at HBCU. There's a lot of political politics. People are running for office, and people, as you said, we have editors at the Hilltop. So there was a lot of maneuverment and understanding power dynamics and conversation, and just socially, I think I really matured at Howard University. And I just want to say, hearing everyone's remarks, I'm really smiling because I also have friends who come out of PWIs and now they're saying they're honorary Bison, or they want to have that shine, you know, because they missed that opportunity. I have friends now who are from Nigeria and have gone back, and I've visited them in Nigeria and Ghana. Like, it's a real world perspective that we were able to have the opportunity to experience. So as I'm only about 4 years out now, I'm already reaping those benefits and looking forward to how these friendships and relationships will continue to grow. So I'm just really smiling at all the responses thus far. I want to know, what are your priorities for our newly elected leadership? We know we've had a very tumultuous past 4 years. And so as we're entering into a new presidency, what are you thinking about as far as the priorities for Black America and for the nation quite broadly? And I know it's
Okay.
a hard question.
I've given it a little thought because I guess it's close to my heart. We've had over 450 murders in the city of Philadelphia since the beginning of the year, more than ever before. And I just can't understand, in a pandemic, you know, when people are supposed to be at home, you know, that things have gotten so out of control. But it's easier to get a gun than it is to purchase a book or a library card. And so I'm really interested in gun reform and about police reform and about the crime in our communities. It's not safe for little kids to even sit on their steps and play anymore. You can't go to the corner store in some neighborhoods. So that has really hit me in a place of wanting to see something happen so that our young folks aren't killing each other in the streets.
Yes, gun reform is definitely needed because the same thing is happening here in my city in Baltimore. So much gun violence, you just can't even keep up with it. It's just totally ridiculous. But you know, this year's election, Black women, we delivered the vote. We delivered the Biden-Harris ticket to be victorious. So I want us as Black women to just get together, be organized, and really have a true voting bloc that will matter for us, to give us some advantage and, you know, just make our lives more quality, even with economics. I know we have the Lilly Ledbetter Act and all that, but women, we still don't get a full dollar for every you know, thing that we do, all of our work that's earned. So equal pay is one concern that I would like to see, even though I'm counting the days to retirement, 740 days, but I still
Come on and join me.
yes,
Counting.
I want to live that good life of retirement, but economic development and prosperity is right up there with gun reform for me.
Yeah, and just to tag on to the economic piece of it, I mean, I think the first thing that the Biden Harris administration has to do is to do something for the people, folks right now who are out of jobs, folks right now, you know, who are, you know, in food lines. It just, you know, amazes and appalls me that nothing is seriously being done for these folks. I mean, I'm blessed to be in a position that I am, that I don't quite frankly have to worry about that, but it's still painful, you know, that
To watch.
hands, you know, that has to be, you know, job one. And one of the other pieces for me has to do with education. I've worked, you know, in education for many years, and it needs to be some educational equity. You know, most of the kids who are coming out of inner city schools, and I've worked in several schools right here in Washington D.C. They are actually overcoming odds more often than not, and that shouldn't have to be the case. You know, they should not have to, you know, climb that much higher than kids who live in more suburban and wealthier schools and school districts. So the educational equity, which is something, you know, that I certainly feel strongly about, needs to be a priority at all times.
What I would like to see done is some sort of priorities given to student debt. I think that we need to create more opportunities for students that want to attend college and, you know, to be able to go without graduating with a lot of debt. I was very encouraged by Michael Bloomberg's $7.7 million donation to the Charles R. Drew Medical School in LA. So I'd like to see more things like that, because not everybody can get an academic scholarship, but there are a lot of students who have the motivation, they just don't have the money. So if there could be something done, and this is just across the board, I think any student nowadays who wants to get a college education should be able to go for free.
I agree with all the things that you all have said. So I'll try not to repeat. I think some things that I had as priorities that may not have been mentioned. Housing. In the United States of America, to be the country that we are, to have the resources that we have, I think we can shave some money off what we spend in other areas, like the huge dollars that are spent on defense, and we can put something in housing. I just believe there are some basic needs that every American ought to have, things that you all mentioned, but I think housing, education, food, and healthcare are basic things that no American should have to go to sleep at night wondering how they're going to have those needs met the next day. There are too many people who don't have a roof over their heads, don't know where they're going to get their next meal, the food insecurity that Roger talked about. We've had Republicans who have tried multiple times to do what they could to chip away at healthcare. We don't know where the Supreme Court's going to come out on the case that was just heard a couple of weeks ago, right after the election. But we need to shore up what the Affordable Care Act has, what's left of it, what they didn't chip away at it. And then the last thing that I would mention, it's related to police reform, but it's different. I think I would like to see them focus on what we can do to get more justice in the courts, more justice in the legal system. We're now going to start with their administration, with Mitch McConnell and the Republicans having put in more than 220 judges that have been signed off on, some of them very young in age, who will be there for a long, long time, the next generation. And we have too many of our people that are going to be subject to the legal system. So where we can affect the laws that the judges, that they unfortunately have put in, many of whom, over 100 of them, they denied President Obama being able to make appointments to. If we can do something to improve the justice that even those judges will have to enforce in the courts, it will be wonderful.
Yeah.
Well,
Definitely.
one thing is that as soon as he gets into office, they need to expand the Supreme Court bench. It needs to be some balance because right now it really swings heavily to the right.
Yes.
Well,
If I
And
could
then,
just add just one more thought in the healthcare field. The Student National Medical Association from the 1970s, which I was a member of, back then said healthcare is a right. I do believe healthcare is a right. I also think that we should go forward with more emphasis on nutrition and lifestyle changes, which can affect 70% of chronic illnesses, hypertension, diabetes, kidney disease. That's where the healing is really going to come from. It's not going to come from the pharmaceuticals, et cetera. So I think we really need to start focusing in on those things because it's not going to happen otherwise.
correct.
And I think the responses to the past question are propel us well into my next question. I just wanted to offer some thoughts as well, because gun violence came up quite a bit. And I think, when I hear gun violence, I think of the lack of education, the lack of job security,
That's right.
mental health resources, homelessness. And I think for me, I'm someone who, although I'm a theater artist and an artist quite broadly, my interest is really in history. And so I look at the impact of the 70s and 80s and what integration did for us when we have a Black middle class going to suburbia and we left our other counterparts vulnerable to ghettos. So I think there's a lot of conversation to have about what does gun reform look like and what are the other resources so that we don't have people who find the need to commit crime. Because I'm not a believer that people want to commit crime.
Right.
But there is, unfortunately, people are trying to survive in a very hard world. And as we said across the board, in the United States, we shouldn't have people in those situations. So my next question is, someone again, thinking about the past, I'm very much so interested in the Black Panther Party and other community-oriented ways of policing and self-governance. And so I'm wondering, what are some ways in 2020 and 2021 that we can come back to being community-oriented and having those checks and balances with our neighbors, with our communities? I know the church is an institution where we still have some of those practices in play, but just asking quite broadly, what are some ways that we can look out for one another, given all of the disparities that we just acknowledged?
I'm a big person as it relates to organizations, and there are so many Black organizations ranging from the NAACP to Black Lives Matter, and then you got the sororities and fraternities. You got the churches, as you mentioned, and I think that one of the things that I always advocate for is those organizations coming together and sitting down and breaking bread and finding common ground on the issues that affect the Black community, even though generations may separate the leaders of the NAACP and the leaders of Black Lives Matter. The issues don't change, and Janine hit on a lot of them, in her last comments, healthcare, housing, education, criminal justice, all those issues continue to be with us. And I think, I think the best way, is in coalitions. I believe in coalitions and in working together. And just on the Black Panthers, I mean, I think, the image of the Black Panthers that sticks in everyone's mind is them standing outside the Capitol in Sacramento, California with long rifles. The images that we don't often see is them feeding breakfast to kids or giving kids school books. The Black Panthers were not a violent organization. Black Panthers stood up for the Black community in the name of self-defense. But the Black Panthers, more than anything else, brought in programs that benefited Black children, feeding programs for the families and children. And so all of these organizations, as I mentioned, have a role and a place. And I just like to see more of them sit down and see where they all fit in.
yeah, I agree. I concur with what Roger said, because the whole problem with gun violence, it does relate to a systemic problem.
Yes.
So it's just not a one unilateral thing. So all of us need to come together, organizations, as he mentioned, along with city government, state government, federal government, to address the problem, because it can make a difference. I remember, was it in the mid 80s, a lot of Black women's organizations came together to address teenage pregnancy. And after different programs got in place, we found, statistics show that the girls usually got pregnant after school in her mother's house, because nobody was home. So they started putting programs in place for, the girls not to go home and go someplace else. So, that was a collaborative effort, and it made a difference. Teen pregnancy rates did decline then. So yeah, we would definitely need to look at a systemic approach, collaboration, to address the problem.
Back in, I think it was 1970, my parents sent me to a community work camp in Oakland, California, and there were, I guess, 15 teenagers from across the country that could choose to do whatever community service they wanted to do. So I worked for the Panthers in Oakland in their breakfast program. So I can attest to the fact that the work that the Black Panthers did was indeed community-based, and it wasn't violence. They didn't speak violence. They talked about empowering the community so that we could be self-sufficient. And so that has always been something that was near and dear to me, giving Black folks the tools that they need to take care of ourselves. We can't depend on other folks to do it for us. We have to do it for ourselves. And I think as Peaks and Roger have both said, that coming together as a collective, we are stronger together than we are apart. And I think that this election has even proven that, because we've come together, the sororities have come together in a way that I've never witnessed before in my life. And even in a virtual world, we have come together to kind of put our money together, pull our efforts together to make sure that the administration that we have now would be no longer. And I think because 40, as someone says, 46 minus 1, they didn't even give him the credit of calling him 45. But because he was so horrible and so mean and spiteful, and all of the things that we had worked so hard to gain, we had gone back in time. Because we were put in that situation, it caused us to galvanize. So if nothing else came from 46 minus 1, it was the fact that we realized we better get up and do something, and do something quickly. So
Yeah. One of the tools to combat some of the things that's going on with us is mentoring. And right there in Washington, D.C., there was a program called Project 2000, started by Dr. Spencer Holland, where he had African-American males going into the classroom as teacher assistants to sort of serve as role models for our kids. And I'm sure that the same thing can be done for African-American females. We have to be able to let them see and be able to touch that there is an alternative. And so I think that mentoring is perhaps a way to help break that. There are some people who've written that there may never be gun control in America. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing out of Howard University in
yeah,
the ISIS papers wrote some
that's right.
fabulous, the ISIS paper, which I think every Black person should read in order to understand how to negotiate and deal with white supremacy, the conspiracy to destroy Black boys and Black girls in a Black family, and all sorts of things. Because after you read that, you come out with a sense of strength, actually, rather than a sense of guilt and why is it that they hate me, and why, no, you come out on the other side of that much more strengthened.
That's right.
And so if we can portray that sense of strength to our young people, it'll help. it's critical for our young people to have a sense of history, because as I went through various things and people would tell me, as a surgeon on a skills level from 1 to 10, you have skills of 1. I was like, I don't think so. I was like, I could be taught. And by the way, the first doctors on earth were Africans. All right.
That's
The
right.
first
That's
surgeons
right.
on earth were Africans. And
Teach.
it's like, I mean, like people that created math, and math was created by Black people, not by the Greeks. And, so you have to have a strong sense of your history to negotiate through all of this stuff. And I have failed in
Mm.
explaining that to the young people. It's like, if they don't know about the civil rights movement, they can watch the Eyes on the Prize, PBS 12-hour documentary series that explains who all of these people were and explain what they did back then, so that they have a a sense of strength. Enough said.
Well said.
Very, very well said, Nathan. And that is so our responsibility as elders. We must teach history to the generations behind us, because what they don't know, they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And it amazes me right now when I come across a young person that has never seen Roots. I was at a theater performance a few years ago, and Lou Gossett was in the audience, and I was so excited. And I was telling the young lady who he was, and she said, "Well, who is he?" And I said, "You don't know Lou Gossett?" So I told her who he was and Fiddler and all that. She said, "What is Fiddler?" She never even heard of Roots. So I told her next time she's in Baltimore, she must come by my house and spend the afternoon with me so we can watch Roots together, and I could, break it down to her. We have to teach history, because that's really true. They do not know what they don't know. So we know what they don't know. So let's try to pass it on.
Nate mentioned Project 2000, which I was happy to be part of, along with Peace's husband, Larry Coleman. Of course, they came out of the Washington, D.C. chapter of Concerned Black Men. And Spencer, Howland, as you said, Nate, he was at Morgan State, actually. He came out of worked out of Morgan State. And we had a mentoring program at Stanton Elementary School right here in Washington, D.C. for many years that he headed up. And just the history, Project 2000 was the year that we picked up these young boys when they were maybe like in first or second grade. And 2000 was the year that they were going to graduate. So we must have picked them up, maybe in the 80s or something, and late 80s. So we stayed with them through 10, 11 years of their schooling to mentor and to hopefully give them some stepping stones to go on to do things that they might not have been able to do having grown up in that environment that they were in.
And the critical part about Project 2000 was that it improved attendance, it decreased disciplinary problems, the kids had a higher rate of graduation, and it made a difference because it changed kids' attitudes about education. So the things we have control of, we don't have control of a lot of stuff, but if we change our kids' attitudes about education, that's it right there. That's the great equalizer to me. And like, that's what Howard did for me.
Oh, yeah.
Before I ask my next question, let me make sure I didn't miss anyone. Before we go on, is there any other panelists that wants to chime in? I just want to say and just acknowledge and give a great praise to our ancestor, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. And I think, as Howard alum, as Black intellectuals and scholars, I do think it's just a reminder to me that we share out those names that aren't the most popular in the broader society, that we do the work of elevating our intellectuals who are giving us the knowledge that is specific to us. So just wanted to say that out loud because I just smiled when I heard that name. So just taking a...
I think we underestimate sometimes the type of instructors and professors that we had at Howard University. And sometimes it isn't until later on
Mhm.
and because when you're in the midst of it, when you're a student and and you're taking these classes, and you take things for granted. And then you learn later on, you not only have what you've learned, but then you find out sometimes later in life exactly who some of these people were, you know, prior to being professors and instructors at Howard University. I know that's true with some of my professional, my journalism and broadcasting instructors. You know, they were editors with Johnson Publications and worked at the White House and so forth in various capacities. But you know, as a student, you know, you kind of take it for granted. But we were blessed, you know, in that regard. I know, I think we were.
One more plug. I'm sorry. Dr. Anthony T. Browder, the author of Nile Valley Civilization, Exploding the Myths. Every freshman should be required to read that. Why? Because when you read that, you have the foundation to fight everything. It's like people are going to tell you, well, you can't be an engineer. You can't be an astrophysicist. Your socks are pink. You can't do this. You're a girl. You're black. You're this or that. Once you read that, you're like, no. Wait a minute. That hasn't been my history. Once you stand firm in your history, you can't be shaken. Now, nobody's perfect. Ain't nobody going to know everything all at once. But the fact that you have achieved in the past and you've laid the groundwork for culture, religion, science, the arts, all of that stuff. Once you understand that, that's what helps you to fight the power.
Nathan, you know what? I'm sorry. Anthony Browder, what he used to do, and I don't know whether he's still doing it, but he would take people on a tour of DC. And what he would do was to show you the similarities between ancient Egypt and the monuments that we have in Washington, D.C., and how everything was stolen from the Nile Valley. He's amazing, amazing brother.
Thank you. My next question is a little pivot from our more political conversation as we're coming towards the end. I just wanted to hear, and it could be anything, just from you all, what was a major lesson of this quarantine time? You know, and unfortunately, we're still in quarantine, but what did this time inside, this reflective period, what are some of the things that came to mind that you would like to share out?
I tell you, one thing I learned is I don't have to go somewhere to connect with people. I haven't gone to a lot of places, but I have remained in contact. I have stayed in contact with Howardites. I have stayed in contact with family. I have stayed in contact with friends. I have still been able to be politically engaged. You know, in March, I felt a little bit frozen at first. I immediately followed, you know, all of what the governor and everybody was saying. Shut down, didn't go anywhere. And I was starting to wonder at the beginning, you know, how was all this going to work out? I wasn't a big online person, except for a few things that I would get regularly from Amazon. But I was a people person. So I expected to be able to see people and go to my meetings and do my volunteering. I'm a big volunteer out in the community person. And I just could not fathom how I was still going to be the outgoing, get out there, do things kind of person that I've enjoyed being. And not that I want to try to give Zoom the plug, but Zoom has just been the connection for this, for family, for organizations that I'm in. And so what I have learned is we had it all along. We, you know, it's It's really, really corny, but you know, at the end of Wizard of Oz, when the witch tells Dorothy, you always had it, it was always within.
Mhm.
We always had ways to connect to each other because this was not new technology. It just wasn't being used in the way that we are now using it. And I found the same thing with my family members. We have once a month Zoom now with family members that we never thought about doing before. I have, I'm probably more connected to some people than I was before. And so that's what I've learned, that I don't have to just wait until I can go somewhere. I don't have to wait until I can physically do something. This election happened. We were successful in getting Kamala Harris and Joe Biden elected. Republicans didn't think we could do it because they said they still had to have all those huge rallies in these big places. And they were looking at Democrats like we were crazy, Democrats and independents, that we were crazy. There's no way we were going to pull this off if we didn't do the face-to-face. And while we've missed the face-to-face, because I used to do door-to-door canvassing, and I missed that opportunity to do that, but we found a way. We found a way. And so where there's a will, there's a way. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I've learned most is really to value our so-called essential workers.
Yes, that's what I was saying too.
Professionals, bus drivers, grocery store employees. I mean, I think that they
And
sacrifice. You know, they sacrifice. We haven't given them their due in the past. They haven't gotten the pay that they probably deserved in the past, and they're the ones most exposed to the disease.
True.
So I really, I mean, I've always thought, you know, of them in high esteem, in part because of, again, my labor movement background and my blue collar family, but they've really gone up in my eyes in terms of the way they've had to contribute to all of us while we're home and doing what we might be doing. You know, the guy driving that bus is still, you know, coming down my street, you know, with a bus full of people more often than not. So that's really, you know, driven home, at least for me, the need to really honor and respect, you know, the work that they've done and what they've done during this, you know, during this very difficult time for all of us.
Yeah, very
I
true.
think I've always been very busy. If my day wasn't filled with a zillion things to do, I just didn't feel like I was accomplishing anything. And one of the things this has taught me to do is just to be still. And being alone with my thoughts sometimes, you know, has been very, very moving for me. Doing things that I would never ever think about doing, taking the time to just to think, you know, and just to appreciate things that we take for granted, you know, going for walks and looking at trees and noticing nature and God's beauty and bounty. I've just not taken the time to appreciate that. My husband and I have started playing board games, and you know, we turn off at one time I had to just turn the TV off and stop watching CNN and some of the other you know, social media outlets, just to sit back, reflect, and just take time to be present. And if nothing else, I've learned the importance of being present, the importance of family, and the importance of taking time to nurture yourself, you know, being mindful of the fact that you have to protect and you have to love on yourself before you can do anything for anybody else. Yeah, so that's been my takeaway from the pandemic. And You know, a lot of people talk about hating 2020. I've grown so much this year that I feel that 2020, although I've lost friends and people that I love, you know, to this wicked disease, it has definitely been a blessing in my life, if you look at it in that nature.
Yes, I concur with everything that you all have said. And one thing that's been my refrain, I can't remember the scripture, but it is be still and know that I
And
am
know that
God.
I am God.
That's what this pandemic has shown me so many times, because none of it is up to us. You know, it's up to God what happens. And it just shows you how fragile your life is, because I have lost several people that, you know, in my village. Even my aunt, my mother's last living sister, passed on May 18th from COVID. And, you know, it's just unbelievable. But I just value relationships more. This pandemic has just made us see how, you know, things that we should have been doing already before the pandemic, like, you know, these stores now have special hours for senior citizens. We should have had that already. We need that. You know, some of these financial institutions giving people a break on their credit or debt or whatever, they should have been doing that. When they see you at a working pool and you're trying to make it, they shouldn't just cut you off or work with you, you know? So things like that, families sitting down. I'm so pleased to be able to eat dinner before 7 o'clock. I'm typically getting on a train at 7 o'clock in DC to come home to Baltimore. But I can sit down with my husband and have dinner at 5:30. That feels so normal, you know? So the pandemic has been awful, but it has brought some good normalcy. And then another thing, you just never know, you know, how different things affect people. One thing that really, really, you know, bothers me about the pandemic, not just losing lives, but domestic violence
Oh yeah.
is so high now because women can't get out. You know, they're captured with their abuser. And that really is disturbing, you know, to me. So the pandemic is, you know.
Yeah. One of the things that the pandemic has pointed out to me, I agree with what everybody has said. It has caused us to be more mindful, to slow down, and to go within. Um, I think as a group, and the disparate way that the virus has affected us is more of a clarion call for us all to pay attention to our nutrition and lifestyle, because nutrition does affect your immune system, even though you may have some predispositions genetically. But so that's a focus that I think that we need to go away with, that there is hope.
And my husband just heard me say, "Be still and know that I'm God." He looked up the scripture. It's Psalm 46:10.
Amen.
All right, Brother Larry.
Well, if there are no more comments, we are now at our time. And I want to say I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It's lifted my mood for the afternoon. I've learned a lot, so I appreciate you all. I thank you for your kind words and your thoughtfulness during this last hour. And I just want to leave the floor open if there's any final remarks or comments you'd like to say for those who will watch this video.
I just want to make this public service announcement. You know, traditionally our homecoming was in October, but for all Bison, homecoming is January 20th, 2021.
Yes.
Our alum, Senator Harris, will be installed as Vice President of the United States. So that's our homecoming, whether it's virtual or not. That's it.
Yeah.
And I just want to give a shout out to your generation, Malik,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
when your generation, for the most part, a diverse group of you were in the streets in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder, my thinking was, will they be there in November?
That's right.
Young folks turned out in big
Amen.
numbers to help
Yeah.
elect a new president of the United States and a vice president who's a Bison. So
Yeah.
that gives me tremendous hope, you know, to see, and I hope the young folks continue to be there, because you're the future. And we say that, and at this point, at this age, I certainly mean it. So I want to really give a shout out to the young folks who came on strong, not just in the streets protesting and rallying, but in the voting booth. And I want to give them the props for that. I tell my daughters, I got a 31-year-old and a 35-year-old, and they're already, they know they have to vote. But I commend their peers, to them as well. Absolutely.
Yes.
I think that was so right on. And for the young folks to understand that the elders are here for them. We're here to push them, and we're here to support them, and that they can't do it without us, and we can't do it without them.
Yes.
True.
Malik, I have a request.
Yes.
I think Howard University should start a school of the elders. It'll be the most resourceful knowledge base of experiences anywhere in the world.
I love that. I will have to pass that. I'm working with Howard on some things, so I will pass that along and keep you in contact. That's a great idea. And I think that is a good note to end on today. It was truly a great pleasure and privilege. So thank you all for your time today. And I'm just wish you a very blessed weekend and a great week next week.
This message has been brought to you by the National Black Leadership and Empowerment Project.